There. My name is Suze, and I work with women to help them find balance between their internal masculine and feminine energies so that they can have really great lives full of love, connection, and emotional fulfillment. So, today I want to talk about validation. And it's a word that I think we see thrown around sometimes, but I don't really feel like enough emphasis is placed on the idea of validation and how really big of a role it plays in emotional healing in general, but not only in emotional healing, but even in a greater sense of self worth. And I'm struggling with finding my words right now because it really is such a powerful word to me and it is so underestimated. And I also find that a lot of times there is a shame connotation attached to validation in the sense of being shamed for wanting to feel validated, right? So obviously, there is a point where we could be looking for external validation too much or relying entirely on external validation, which is clearly not healthy either and gets us down a path of codependency and all that. And I'm not going there today. So there is obviously a split here in where validation falls. But for myself and my own journey, I really can't emphasize enough how much self validation matters, significantly matters. And for those of you who don't know, and I know I haven't really gotten into the intimate details of my story on YouTube, but in my life's journey, I come from a background of severe emotional neglect. And part of it was just life. My mother passed away when I was 3 years old. So there was a mother wound from loss of a mother. And obviously, a 3-year-old cannot comprehend death. So I internalized it in a very different way. And then having a father figure who was a very wounded masculine father, not creating a safe space for me at all emotionally and being extremely emotionally neglectful and absent in my upbringing and physically absent for a good part of it as well. Um, so all of that to say, I've had a lot of experience in my life with emotional stuff and trauma. Let's just drop that word trauma right here. And in my journey of working with other people who have had significant things happen to them, severe emotional neglect in a variety of different ways, and working through their emotions and trying to integrate and create connection with people can be really challenging when you were not set up for success, so to speak. You were not set up for success in creating connection, in creating relationships with others when your childhood was what it was. And so, in that realm, communication can become really noticeably different for you. And what I mean by that is when you're having an emotional experience and you're recognizing you're really trying to do things differently. For instance, in my experience, I went through a great part of my adult life where I was not communicating and I wouldn't get vulnerable and I wouldn't let people know what I was feeling and I didn't even know what I was feeling. I was so shut down to myself. So when I finally decided to let myself be seen, and that's another issue that can come up from childhood, is if you're not allowed to be seen as a child and you're learned to just stay small and not noticeable. And then you come into adulthood and you decide to let yourself be seen. You decide to let your needs be known and expect that your needs will be respected and that you are taking care of your needs. And you're working through all this emotional process that comes along with compounded trauma. You can really hit a snag when you start communicating and you feel like, first of all, people aren't understanding the depth or the intensity of what you're trying to communicate. And you just recognize there's not a meeting here. I'm trying to communicate and be vulnerable. I am trying to create connection with this person. I am trying to show up emotionally available in a way I have never previously done in this dynamic and it's not working, right? I don't know how many of you out there have been in this space as me, but it can be really frustrating because you're really trying to reinvent yourself. You're really trying to create a new identity, a healthier, authentic, emotionally available identity, and it's just not working on the other end, right? And so this is when I really started understanding how self-validation was so important. And I'm lucky. In my human design chart, I'm a 3-5 profile, which means it's literally in my energetic body the desire to experiment. And I like to try things firsthand in my life and learn in that way. I tend to resist if someone just gives me something. I tend to resist it and I need to kind of prove things out on my own, right? So I had this thought about self-validation and I decided to plug it in and just see what happened. And it was really, really radical. And this is one of those things where you have to trust the process and you have to keep repeating it. And it's almost like it's a cumulative thing that ends up bringing some really great results. But I started really validating myself. And what I mean by that is if I was about to enter into a conversation with someone who I trusted, this is not about oversharing your private, intimate information with just random people. If I was about to really get vulnerable, or I knew I really had this deep urge inside of me to communicate something to someone who I'm intimately connected with, and I understood it felt like a really intense stretch for me to expose this information about myself or to let these emotions or let my process be seen to another person. But I knew at the end of the day, my intention was to create better understanding for the relationship. So in other words, it was for the higher good of the relationship. I felt like this is information, communication I needed to bring to the table for the higher good of the relationship so that we could get closer together, so that we could emotionally have deeper emotional intimacy. I learned that I had to start prefacing these conversations with validating myself, starting the conversation out by saying something like, this may not seem like a big deal to you, but this is a really big deal to me. And I really want to share this with you. There's nothing for you to fix here. I'm not looking for you to fix or solve my problems. I'm working through this, but this is a really big deal. I'm going to get really vulnerable here, and it would really help me out if you could just listen and hold the space for me to speak. And starting out conversations in that way, it really sets a tone for a lot greater success in the connection that I'm looking to feel more connected to the other person. It really sets the tone. Not only does it do that, it's like you're sending an alert out to the other person. Pay extra attention here. I need a little extra attention here. This is something really important to me, and I understand my life experience is not your life experience, but I'm also recognizing I'm having this really big need for a little extra tenderness, a little extra gentleness, a little extra awareness around the fact that I'm going to get really vulnerable and I need a little extra support. And when you really start communicating in that way, it's really interesting over time how much it changes for yourself internally. And that's the beauty of it, is it ends up becoming not even about the other person. And it's not about trying to get a particular end result. It ends up evolving into self-respect, self-seeing, self-recognition, which are all building blocks to self-worth. When you know your own journey and you know how hard you've had to work to get the bravery up to communicate or to be in a certain way with people or with yourself or at work or in your life or with your kids or whatever the situation is, when you know the conscious efforts you've made to get yourself somewhere, self-worth starts to skyrocket. And you have to validate it every step of the way. So I started getting to the habit, and that was with, I started doing that in validation with conversations with people who I found to be a little bit more challenging for me to connect with emotionally for a variety of reasons. But people that were a little bit more difficult for me to emotionally connect with due to different life experiences or other differences. And then with my really close girlfriends, like my core, like inner circle, like I trust you with my life, inner circle girlfriends, I noticed I started validating myself on the phone with them, not in the way of I need extra support here, but more of I'm working through something verbally with you on the phone and I'm validating myself the whole time. So, in other words, maybe I'm going to tell about something that occurred to me this week. I'm speaking to my girlfriend and I'm going to tell her, oh, I realized this. And I validate myself and I say, and this is really great. Like, I have come so far, and I am so proud of myself for how far I have come on this particular thing. And the fact that I'm having this realization right now and sharing it with you, this is amazing for me. And I see all the things I had to do to get to this place of realization and self awareness. This is how we have to really start talking in our conversations because no one is ever going to be able to validate your story like you can. You know how hard you've had to work through some things. You know the pain of all the things in your life that you've experienced and how that impacted you internally and how that changed you and shifted you and altered you into being this other person and how hard you've had to work to undo that damage to be your authentic true self. So you are the only one who can validate your story at the level that you need to feel validated. You know, we do so often look outside ourselves, and then when we don't get the validation we need externally, then we kind of collapse in on ourselves and are like, oh, and then you get down on yourself, and then you start shaming yourself, and then you just feel you're not good enough, and then no one ever sees me, and no one ever stands and understands, and I'm all alone, and I mean, it goes on and on and on. So the best way to fix this is, again, my cat's coming up the chair. This is Willow. She's coming to say hello. The best way to fix this is to take responsibility for yourself and your own healing and start validating yourself. And this really is so important in this raw, vulnerable communication because that is real. That is acknowledging your pain. That is acknowledging your struggle. That is acknowledging your story. A while back, I stumbled across this quote talking about trauma, and I'm not going to quote it because I don't remember it exactly. But basically, it was talking about how trauma is not the thing that happened to you. Trauma is the after effect by not having an empathetic witness in the thing that happened. So it's not the actual emotional event that happens to us that causes the trauma. It's the lack of an empathetic witness to our difficulty, to the emotional response, how much it hurt. I love when she starts peeking around. I'm backwards on the screen. I'm backwards. I don't know where I'm pointing. I think I'm pointing at her and I'm not. But isn't she so cute? It's my little Willow. So we have to start validating our own story. And that really starts healing a lot of childhood stuff too, because that is the root of the problem. Emotional neglect, a lot of the emotional neglect in childhood comes from the fact that you were not validated as a child. So you have to start validating yourself. I hope this video helped you guys. Thank you so much for stopping by and for watching. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.